description and what I thought about the book. So, let's get started. The first Stephen King book that I ever read was Fairy Tale. Fairy Tale, Fairy Tale, Fairy Tale. As you can see on the cover, there is a boy. His name is Charlie. And then there's a dog named Radar. Radar, Radar. I really liked Radar. I think Radar, even though it's a dog and it doesn't talk, I think Radar is one of my favorite characters in any Stephen King book. Which is saying a lot because Stephen King is a master at creating characters. So, this book is obviously about a fairy tale. It is about this boy who meets an older man who needs help doing stuff because he's old. And when the old man dies, he finds this portal to this other world. And in this portal is obviously another world. In the other world, there's this thing that can turn back time on living things. So he is trying to save Radar from dying because Radar is getting old. And obviously there's a lot more to it, but that's basically the description. It's been almost 3 years since I read this, so I don't remember everything. But since it is more of a fantasy, it is not as scary as most Stephen King books. It does have a few moments, but really not much. And I do remember it does get a little sad at times. I think one of my favorite parts of the book is every chapter. Actually, I guess I'll show you the beginning so I'm not spoiling anything. At every chapter, there's an illustration to start out, which is super cool in my opinion. I really liked this book. I think I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars on my goodreads. I will, if I remember, I will link my goodreads account in the description so that you can check out all the books that I've read and what I think of them. And also let me know if you want to hear about more books that I've read. Or I can also show off my entire Stephen King collection, including books I haven't read yet. So yeah, that was Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Next, we have one of my favorite Stephen King books, The Shining. And I have it's not a first edition, but it is a very old edition. I think it might be a book club edition. Oh no, it's not. But a very old edition, one of the first printings. So the original cover, we have Jack Torrance, Danny Torrance, and I can't remember her name. Let me check. It is it should be towards the front, I think. At least once. Right? You'd think so. It's Jack's wife. I don't know why I can't remember her name, especially because I've seen the movie. And I read the book and I loved the book. Wendy. Her name is Wendy. That's right. Wendy Torrance, right here. And behind them is the Overlook Hotel. And it says right here, Salem's Lot. Oh, I like that sound. So, this is The Shining. The Shining is about Jack Torrance, who is a writer, and he takes a job taking care of the Overlook Hotel during the winter while there are no guests staying there. It is a very secluded place because during the winter it is dangerous to drive in Colorado, where the Overlook Hotel is. So it is just Jack, Danny, and Wendy in this hotel. And strange things start to happen, and they all go a little crazy. I really, really enjoyed this book. Like I said, it's one of my favorite Stephen King books, and I thought it was 10 times better than the movie could ever wish to be. I did not enjoy the movie very much. I believe they missed out so much from the book, and I have to agree with Stephen King that they kind of just ruined the story. Something interesting about me is that I actually went and visited the hotel that inspired Stephen King to write The Shining. And that same hotel was used in the Shining miniseries that Stephen King made when he didn't like the movie. So that was very fun and interesting to see. And Stephen King actually stayed in room 217, which is the room that is kind of popular in the book. And at the hotel, room 217 is booked for the next 2 years, which is so crazy to me. Alright, moving on. The next book we read is another one of my favorites, and I even have it somewhere on my wall. I think it's right there. Yep, but I have another copy. It is On Writing by Stephen King, a memoir of the craft. I really like this cover too because it has King right there and his little puppy right there in his office, which is kind of cool. So, this book is about kind of how Stephen King writes and what he thinks about writing and stuff like that. But it's also a memoir of part of his life, and it talks about a lot of things, how he grew up, his kind of experience with writing, and his experience writing this book, including when he got hit by a car and almost died back in, I think, 1999. So that was very interesting to read about. I really enjoyed this book because I would like to write books someday, and this information was very helpful. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and it's one of my favorites of any book I've read. It is my favorite memoir by far, and obviously I liked it enough to put it on my wall. Sorry that my hair is a little crazy. Alright, the next book we have is Misery. So, I was actually taking a class at high school called Bestsellers when I read some of these books. Basically in the class, the whole thing was just pick a book and read. And we had to read at least 5 books in the span of 1 semester, which was about 4 months. I read 15. So was talking to the teacher, he asked who my favorite author was, and I told him Stephen King. And he asked me if I'd read Misery yet, and I said I had not. And he said, you have to read Misery. Misery is about a writer named Paul Sheldon and his number one fan, Annie Wilkes. Paul is the author of books that feature the character Misery Chastain. And Annie Wilkes loves the Misery books. So much so that when Paul decides to kill off his most popular character, Annie kidnaps him and forces him to write her another book featuring Misery. This book is super scary, super uncomfortable, and I love that Stephen King is able to make such an interesting story out of two characters in one house. That's it. There's only one setting, two characters, and it's 300 pages, but somehow it was one of the best books I've ever read. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars as well. And if you are just starting out with Stephen King, this is one of the books I'd recommend. Alright, the next book I don't actually have a copy of, but I do have it on my Kindle. Let me turn the brightness down. It is The Mist. Whoops. The Mist by Stephen King. Whoops. I did something else. I don't know what I did. Uh-oh. Okay, that's okay. I'll just tap on the outside of my Kindle and talk about The Mist. So, The Mist is a short story by Stephen King. It features a family who gets trapped in a supermarket when a mist kind of rolls over the whole town and possibly the whole country. It's not really specified how far it goes, but it is super interesting. It is basically a story about how catastrophe can bring out the best and worst of people, because in the grocery store there's obviously a bunch of people, and some of them try to group together to help each other, while others just want to cause chaos. I really liked it, and I think I finished it in one day because it's only about 200 pages. I'd say I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't say there's anything bad about it. The ending it left me wanting more, which I know that's sometimes how endings are supposed to be. But I was sad that I don't get any kind of closure without saying too much to spoil it. But I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're just looking for a shorter book to read. It is still amazing. I think it's my favorite short story I've read by Stephen King. Alright, moving on. Next, we have my second favorite book I've read by Stephen King. It. Now this is a brick of a book. It is huge. It is 1,138 pages. He wrote it in the span of 4 years, from September 9th, 1981 to December 28th, 1985. This copy of it is one of my prized possessions because, unlike The Shining, this is a genuine first edition copy of it. I don't really like the deep bassy sounds that it makes, but the spine sounds nice. So, if you don't know what it is about, then I don't know where you've been living, because I feel like everyone knows what it is about, but I will explain it regardless. So, it is about a group of 6 kids who start to notice some weird things happening in their town. And when they start to investigate, they realize that an interdimensional creature that can shapeshift and cause hallucinations of your worst fears, it's living in their town and feeding off of children, and especially feeding off their fear. So they have to work to stop this creature. Also in the book, we see the kids 27 years later as adults who have to come back and fight it once again. That's not a spoiler because in the book it is split up very weirdly. It has like a chapter from 1958, and then the next chapter jumps to would it be 86? I can't remember. Let me see if I can find the dates. I can't find them. Where does the chapter end? Oh, here we go. 1985. That's what it is. 1985. So, it jumps between timelines, which is very interesting. It is the longest book I have ever read, but it is also one of my favorites, my second favorite Stephen King, and I'd say my third favorite book. This won't make much sense, but my favorite Stephen King book is my fourth favorite book, and this one is my third favorite. I know that doesn't make sense, but it does to me. So, this is by far, it has the best characters I've ever read. It really made me fall in love with all of them, and I was so sad to finish reading. And no book has ever made me feel so nostalgic for a time that I never even lived in. I also loved listening to the soundtrack from the It movies while reading this book, and that really made me feel more immersed. So, I definitely would not recommend this book as your first Stephen King, but when you've read some of his works, definitely check this book out. Alright. Next is my favorite Stephen King book. It is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This book is also not a first edition, but one of the first editions. One of the earliest editions, I should say, of this book. As you can tell, I love collecting older editions of my favorite books. Sorry, I keep messing with my hair. Stephen King often regards Pet Sematary as his scariest book in his only sent it to publishers. And the only reason he did that was because he had a deadline that he had to hit, and he did not have a book ready. Because he never wanted this book to be published. He was that uncomfortable from it. But I am so glad he did, because it is my favorite book by him, and also it turned out to be my favorite horror movie. So, Pet Sematary is about this family who moves to Ludlow, Maine, in order for the father, whose name is Lewis. He got a job in Maine, and so they move to this house right on a road that is very busy. And behind their house is a pet cemetery that the kids of Ludlow used to use to bury their dead pets, most of which were killed on the busy road. Now, behind the pet cemetery is an old burial grounds, an Indian burial grounds is what they call it, which is very much a cliche horror trope, but I think when Stephen King wrote this book, it was not as cliche as it is now. In the Indian burial grounds, if you bury something that has died, the next day it will come back to life, but it is a little different. So, first, their cat Church dies, and Lewis does not want to tell the family, so he buries Church in the pet cemetery, and he comes back to life, and he's different. But then something or someone else dies, and that's all I'll tell you, because I don't want to spoil it too much. But if you want to check out anything by Stephen King, this book right here is an amazing place to start. It really shows off his amazing world building, his characters, and just how scary he can be. Alright, next we have Stephen King's first novel, Carrie. I wanted to show off my old copy, but I also have a paperback that I want to tap on because I think it makes better sounds. So, Carrie is the first novel Stephen King ever published. He tried to publish many books before this, but none of them really worked out, and he almost didn't publish this one. But his wife fished it out of his trash can, read it, and told him that this was a good story, and that he needed to pursue it. And it became the first book he ever published. Carrie is about a girl who is picked on by her classmates, but she has a special gift. She is, I forget the word. It's not psychic, but she has like, I forget what they're called. The powers that, like, she can do stuff with her mind. That's whatever they're called. So, she discovers that she has these powers, and let's just say that the was experienced. Alright, next we have this chunky book. I have not read all of these. Actually, I've almost read all of them. I didn't even realize. But in this book, we're just going to talk about one. We're going to talk about the first one, Rage. This book is the Bachman books for early novels by Stephen King. So, back in the day, when Stephen King was first putting out books, it was not popular for authors to put out anything more than one book a year. Otherwise, it was seen as rushed and not as good quality. So, to get around this, Stephen King started publishing one book under his name and one book under the name Richard Bachman. The first book that he published under this pseudonym was Rage. So, the reason why I do not have a copy of Rage and instead have the Bachman books is because Rage is the only Stephen King book that is out of print and will never be printed again. The reason for this being is that Rage has very controversial topics that Stephen King no longer wants to be printed. I was very intrigued to see what it was about and what was so bad about it. And when I read it, I will say, I didn't think it was as bad as he makes it sound like it is. It definitely has topics that, no author would really want to have published anymore. But I definitely didn't see how it was as bad as some people make it out. Without getting into too much detail, because I don't know what I'm allowed to say on YouTube. It is about a kid who goes into his school and into a classroom and holds them hostage with a weapon. But it's kind of written in a humorous way, almost. I also will say I really just didn't enjoy the book that much. Like, it wasn't even because of the subject matter. I just don't think it was written that well. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So that is Rage. Next. So I guess the last 2 books, or 3 books, were all from this book, because the next one is The Running Man by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman. Now this book just came out as a movie featuring Glenn Powell, and I must say, I really enjoyed the movie, but I also really enjoyed the book. This book is about a guy named Ben Richards, who is as poor can be, in a futuristic world where there are game shows to win money. Well, I mean, every game show is to win money, or most of them are, but these are dangerous game shows. There is stuff where people who are a little more heavy set have to run on a treadmill while answering questions. There is something about like crocodiles, I think. And then there is the biggest game show of all, The Running Man, which is basically you have to survive 30 days while everyone in the country is hunting you. And if you win $1 billion in what they call new dollars, which is the new currency. So Ben Richards signs up for The Running Man, and you see him, his journey through this challenge. was, how are they going to put that in the movie? And then when I watched the movie, I realized that they weren't, and that they changed the ending a little bit. But I will say, most of the time, I don't like movie adaptations of books, but I thought both the book and the movie did a phenomenal job at telling the story, and I liked both endings. Out of the Richard Bachman books that I've read, The Running Man is by far my favorite. Alright, and last but not least, the most recent Stephen King book that I have read is The Long Walk, also written as Richard Bachman. So, The Long Walk also just became a movie, and it got really popular on TikTok, and so this book also got very popular, and a lot of people read this as their first Stephen King. I have to say, I did not enjoy this book or the movie, and I am shocked that I did not quit this book. I just felt like it dragged on so much, and it was so much longer than it needed to be. And that's coming from someone whose second favorite Stephen King book is 1,200 pages. This book just did not do it for me. It felt so repetitive, and I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it much at all. Especially after reading The Running Man, I thought that this book just couldn't even compare. I understand that it does have like a message behind it, and I did like that message, but the writing just wasn't it for me. And then I watched the movie thinking maybe they did it better in the movie, and I really didn't care for it at all. It was emotional, which is what gained it popularity on TikTok, but it was just really boring as well. It just felt like it dragged on. It was repetitive, and you know, I think considering what Stephen King has proven he can do with a limited setting, with like Misery, it's just a shame that I felt like he didn't do more with this, because it could have been such a good book, and it's often regarded as his best Richard Bachman book, but it just wasn't it for me. So, I think I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars, unfortunately. Before I go, I have one more book to show off. This is what I'm currently reading. It is also Stephen King. It is The Stand. I showed this in my first video, but I don't know how much, I can't remember how much I talked about it. I can also show I am much farther in now. I think I was all the way down here at the very beginning, but now I'm about halfway through. So, The Stand is Stephen King's longest novel. This is actually the second version he published, because he published an original edition and then later on an uncut version with more content. And I'm sure when he did that, people were all asking themselves, why do you need more content in a book that's already 1,000 pages long? But it is often regarded as his best novel by a bunch of his fans. It is about a world that is is killed by this plague. So there is like nobody left. And it follows characters from all around the United States and their journey to find other people and kind of adjust to this new life that they have. And it ends up being a very epic novel about good and evil, because there are two like main leaders. There is Mother Abigail, who is a 108-year-old woman, and she is good. And then there is Randall Flagg, who is also known in the book as the Dark Man, and he is evil. Randall Flagg, or the Dark Man, is also in a bunch of other Stephen King books, but I have not read any of those yet. I like that the words stand out on the page. I don't know if you can hear that. You can see it says right here, complete and uncut edition. So, I will let you know what I think about this book when I finish it. It will definitely take me some time. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below what you thought. And if you have any suggestions for more videos or anything like that, also make sure to check out my other videos. I have two posted right now. I have my first video and